I'm a scientist, I'm an inventor, I'm an innovator, and a lover of the beauty industry. So it begs the question, how on earth do you bring back the smell of lost flowers? Is it like Jurassic Park, but for fragrances? And the answer is it sort of is, right, in some ways. We say it's not science fiction, it's science possibility.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Scent World. I'm Marianne Mychaskiw, and my guest today is scientist, entrepreneur, and founder of Future Society, Jasmina Aganovic. This is one of the coolest fragrance brands out there. I'm saying it to you myself. I'm claiming it now because it lives at the intersection of science, nature, and beauty. Future Society is actually creating fragrances birthed from sequenced DNA of extinct flowers. We'll be going through all of their fragrances and hear how Jasmina is looking to the future to reimagine scents from the past. Jasmina, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It is such a fascinating concept that you've come up with Future Society, and it actually sounds like something out of a science fiction movie at first glance.
We say it's not science fiction, it's science possibility. So we talk about that.
I love that. You're really finding new ways to blend biology and beauty. How would you describe what happens when you bring these two worlds together?
New things are possible. New stories, new product experiences, new claims. I think biology has an entirely new set of creative tools that we can use in the beauty industry. And the beauty industry is all about having fun and taking care of ourselves. So I think it's a perfect fit.
What was the inspiration point for Future Society? Have you always been interested in extinct flowers?
I had not always been interested in extinct flowers. I'm an innovator and a lover of the beauty industry. And I hit a point and I realized that there are a lot of women and some men who are just like me who love this industry, but started to become disenchanted by it a little bit. They were feeling kind of disappointed by the products, like it was not sort of delivering what they wanted and everything was the same thing repackaged. And I'm a scientist, I'm an inventor, I'm an innovator, and I feel like there are so many opportunities in beauty. And so with fragrance, I wanted to use science in a really unique way to tell a new story.
And it's also raising awareness in this way where it's like these flowers used to exist in our world and now they don't. And that makes me really sad, but it's really fascinating how you were able to take these attributes from the DNA and really bring them back to life.
Yeah, exactly. I think when we think about the category of fragrance, it is a category that is so rooted in storytelling. And oftentimes we think that storytelling has nothing to do with science, but we use science in a way to enable a new story to be told, right? To be able to reconstruct these scents in a way that wasn't previously possible. And I think this is just one of the many cool examples that show how we can use science in a way to do something that was not previously possible. And the lesson here, I think, is yes, it is sad that these flowers don't exist anymore, but what these fragrances enable is for their stories to live on so that hopefully with the future that we create, we can make different decisions so things like this don't continue happening.
I would love to start smelling the fragrances.
Let's do it.
So let's take a look at the 6 fragrances you've created. We'll start with Invisible Woods.
So first, let me talk about the naming convention with each of the fragrances so that you understand. No one has positioned or launched an extinct flower fragrance. So we were sort of like, what do we name these? And we, of course, could have gone with the Latin name of the flower. So in the case of Invisible Woods, the Latin name of the flower is Wendlandia angustifolia, which is a little bit of a mouthful. So we were like, we don't know that we could really, name it that.
Yeah.
But where we landed was honoring their story of extinction and turning it into a story of reinvention. So Invisible Woods is a perfect example of this. This flower is from India. It used to grow in the Tamil Nadu region, and it disappeared. It used to grow in a forest, and it disappeared basically in 1917, and then due to droughts. And then it was rediscovered in something like the 1980s, and then it disappeared again. So it's believed to be extinct, but it could still be there in that forest waiting to be rediscovered. So this is why this fragrance is called Invisible Woods. It's in the woods. It's invisible. It's still there. there. So as you smell this fragrance, and I can start to talk a little bit about our process as we go through these flowers, but the perfumer behind this fragrance is Daniela Andrier, and she was very inspired by the stories of these flowers, and she wanted to tell the story of the Wendlandia from the perspective of the earth. So this is why you have a lot of earthy elements in this fragrance. You're going to have some turmeric and eucalyptus in there, and some chamomile in the base. So it's warm, but at the top you'll have a little bit of bergamot. I think this is a really sexy herbal, clean fragrance, very sophisticated, but it's really, really beautiful. Daniela did a great job of bringing this one together as an overall composition.
It's really beautiful. Right off the top, I'm getting the turmeric and a little bit of ginger.
Yep.
And then some of the more woody notes are starting to come through. And with a name like Invisible Woods, at first glance, I was like, oh, this is going to be a very beautiful, seductive, wood-forward scent. But it's really bright, and I feel like it would be a really nice summer scent.
Yep. I could see that being the case as well. And Daniela, when she was looking at we'll talk about this in a little bit, but the data that came out of the scientific work that was done, she thought it was really interesting to have a starting point of turmeric, right? She hadn't really thought of turmeric or curcumin as like starting points for her fragrances. So it was like a new approach for her. But she really, again, wanted to tell the story of the flower from the perspective of the earth, which is why you see some of those elements there.
I love that. What was the process like working with her?
Daniela is a strong creative, and I think she, unlike the other perfumers, really wanted to go back to the earth and these like grounding elements. And so she was very out of the box with her thinking. She was also very, I would describe it as like cerebral and intellectual, but in a very creative way rather than in like algorithmic analytical way, which is why her fragrances are the way that they are.
It's a really beautiful composition.
Yeah, thank you.
I can't stop smelling it. But we will move on to Solar Canopy, Solar Canopy, she's been my signature all throughout the summer, and I get so many compliments on this one.
That is amazing. Yeah, it is our most popular of the whole collection. So Solar Canopy is based off of a hibiscus species, the Hibiscadelphus wilderanius. It's a species that grew on Maui, on Mount Haleakala. And this flower disappeared due to changes in agricultural practices there. It was last spotted in 1912. But, right when you smell it, you could definitely get this. You get the Hawaii hibiscus vibes. It is bright. It is floral. It is juicy. It is fruity. You have red currant at the top. You have pink sugar at the base. You have a little bit of pink pepper at the top too, but a lot of like lychee, pistachio, magnolia. It is definitely a fruity, floral fragrance. It's just like pure joy in my mind.
It's absolutely gorgeous. And it really takes you to this beautiful island, Maui, where everything is kind of untouched. And I can really just smell all of the beautiful elements that you have going on here. Lychee, I get it right off the bat. And then as things develop, I feel like I get more of the rose, some of the vetiver as well. It's stunning.
Yeah, the vetiver in the base. Yeah, vetiver in the base and pink sugar in the base. It is a really beautiful fragrance. It was Jerome Epinette that created this one. His process in working with the data that came out of the scientific work was time travel. So he wanted to recreate what it was like walking on Mount Haleakala when these flowers were blooming. And the 1912 time period, that's like the Titanic was taking sail.
I was just going to say.
Camera was like the movie camera was just invented. So we're going way back. But he wanted to like recreate the whole environment of walking in that area.
That actually kind of leads into my next question, because science can be so logical, whereas beauty and fragrance is very emotional and subjective. Since you were kind of working with both, how did you use one aspect to inform the other?
Oh my God, it was hard. And I think it continues to be hard. These fragrances are not meant to be typical. I think with some of them, we deliberately wanted them to obviously like be desirable, wearable fragrances, but they are based off of extinct flowers. So they're not meant to be the run of the mill. And I think if you even like read the reviews on Scentbird, you'll see that our fragrances are in some ways polarizing. I think for Solar Canopy, someone was like, oh my God, this smells like an alien would wear it, but they didn't mean it in like a bad way. They just, they are unusual fragrances. They are unique. They are smells that have never been smelled before. And I think that shows that something in our process, I think, was working as we were developing the fragrances.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as we continue to talk about the story of the fragrances, one thing that we're constantly talking about is how much do we talk about the science? How much do we talk about the fragrances? We did have some perfumers that didn't want to work with us.
Really?
And then we had some that did want to work with us because they were so intellectually stimulated. Like they had never gotten a creative brief based off of DNA sequencing data. So whenever you're doing something new, there's always going to be people that love it and then people that don't.
Exactly. I mean, you can't please everybody. If you could, then everything would smell the same, wouldn't it?
It's true. It's very true. And fragrance, oh my God, is so subjective. And some people have even asked like, oh, well, how do you actually know that the flowers actually smelled this way? And first of all, this was not an exercise in precision.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, because the flowers don't exist, we don't have, a scientific control group. It would be very hard for us to know for sure. And the precision of this whole thing is not the point, but it is the fantasy of time travel and of having the stories come back to life in some way.
Exactly. You're bringing time travel into the mix and using that as an imagination point. So you said that it's not so much about precision when you're developing these fragrances, but I would love to know what your process is like as you go through the sequenced DNA, do the creative brief, and what kind of elements you pull in as inspiration when you are creating these fragrances.
Yeah, we get a lot of questions around this. And the story for this actually goes back to 2014. Actually, before I started this, I was working at a biotech company called Ginkgo Bioworks. And Ginkgo Bioworks in 2014 started basically this work. So it begs the question, how on earth do you bring back the smell of lost flowers? Is it like Jurassic Park, but for fragrances? And the answer is like, it sort of is, right, in some ways. So do you know the company 23andMe and Ancestry.com?
Yes,
do you know those companies?
I did a 23andMe actually.
Okay. So you remember you had to like spit in a tube and then you send this and then they tell you like information about you and your background and like eye color and stuff like that, right?
Definitely. All of my traits and my relatives relatives from like the 1700s, what their traits were and whether or not they like cilantro. Yes.
Exactly. Okay. So the work that was done here was using that exact same technology, but applied to flowers.
Oh
so instead of spitting in a tube, what Ginkgo Bioworks did is they partnered with the Harvard Herbarium and they got very small snippets of specimens of flowers that they had preserved. And those preserved flowers were believed to be extinct, right? So that was how they made the selection of the flowers they wanted to use. And then they sequenced the DNA. So very similar to how 23andMe would sequence what's in your spit. The work that was done here was sequencing those small specimens of flowers. And then we're not looking for eye color or, do you like cilantro? But instead, what they were looking for was the scent molecules that the flower had the genetics to be able to produce. So that was the biggest part of the work. And it's a little bit complicated because DNA degrades. And so, a lot of specialized expertise needed to be used to kind of patch it together. But even once that sequencing work was done, there was still more work that needed to be done to get as precise as they possibly could. And that's because, just like humans carry multiple genes, right? If your dad has blue eyes and your mom has brown eyes, you don't have one blue eye and one brown eye. You have like one set of colors, but you're carrying the gene for that other parent in the background, but you don't express it. So the scent molecules for the flowers were the same thing, right? They have genes for lots of things, but they're not necessarily expressing all of those. So there was a lot of work that was done to better understand what they actually were expressing. And then layered onto that, it's where the flower is from, what it's closely related to, so its own ancestry. And all of that starts to form a composition that you need to sift through and kind of ask logical questions like, oh, well, Is that a scent molecule that's produced by the stem and the leaf versus the actual flower? Things like that. So there was a lot of work to kind of probe on this to try and get as accurate as possible. But unfortunately, like 100% exact precision is just not possible, which is why even things like 23andMe and Ancestry.com are not always fully accurate either.
Exactly. But in the way that 23andMe and Ancestry can find like your closest living relative or cousins you didn't know about, were you able to draw inspiration from some of these flowers' living relatives?
Absolutely. So solar canopy is like a great example of this. We knew that it was related to the family of hibiscus flowers. And so when a perfumer sees data like that, in addition to the actual scent molecules that we had found from sequencing the flower, they're able to say, okay, interesting. Like when I work with hibiscus type accords or flowers or families, like here are the types of accords that I'll reach for or types of scents that I'll use in that composition. But wow, interesting. Like this scent molecule is coming up, and I usually see that with these other plants. So I might want to actually fold in some of these other accords. And through that process, you start to develop a composition and olfactive kind of direction that the perfumer might be taking. And all of this is part of their creative process. We talked about Daniela with Invisible Woods a moment earlier. She was telling the story from the perspective of the earth, which was different from Jerome Epinet's approach, which was time travel and kind of walking through that forest or that hillside. So all of that kind of came together for each of those perfumers alongside the data.
That's amazing. Hey, life finds a way. I would also love to dive into Grassland Opera. This just landed on my desk. I haven't had the chance to smell it yet, so we're doing this in real time together.
Yeah, Grassland Opera is our most musky of all the scents. All of our scents are intended to be unisex. This one skews more masculine than the others. This is based off of a flower that once grew in the North American plains. And it disappeared due to the changing patterns of the buffalo migration, hence Grassland Opera. So grassland, sort of like the environment, and opera, a little bit of like the pitter-patter of the migration. This flower disappeared in 1881. So we're going way back. The perfumer behind this fragrance is Olivia Jan. And she was very exacting in her approach. She was really trying to honor every single one of the molecules that we found in our research. So the profile of this fragrance is you have a little bit of like ginger and fig at the top. But then in the middle, you have ylang-ylang, mimosa, and then at the base, you have sandalwood and patchouli. I love this fragrance for if I'm going to a conference, I have big meetings, if I have a board meeting, like this is like my I feel strong today fragrance.
Oh, I like that. I feel like for me, it's evoking images of just like endless skies, a few clouds in the air, and then just dry, waving grass, like the plains, you know?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. You definitely do get that through this.
What was the consumer reaction to Grassland Opera?
Grassland Opera, I think across all of our fragrances, they've been very well received. Grassland Opera, I think, again, it's like a more musky fragrance for those that like it. Grassland Opera has won a few awards itself. So they've all been very well received.
So the reaction was good. She's got some awards.
Exactly. Yes. Not quite as many as Solar Canopy, but yeah, it's gotten some great awards.
So let's move on to Reclaim Flame.
All right. Reclaimed Flame is another one of Daniela's fragrances. This is based off of a flower from South Africa, the Leucadendron grandiflorum. And this flower disappeared due to wildfires, hence Reclaimed Flame. This flower disappeared, it's believed to have disappeared in the mid 1900s. And again, Daniela's process was telling the story of the flower from the perspective of the earth. This is a warm and yet refreshing fragrance. I don't know how to put it. The people that love this fragrance are like diehard for this fragrance. At the top, you have grapefruit. But what comes across most strongly in this fragrance to me is this unique combination of eucalyptus and turmeric. And then again, there's that chamomile at the bottom. So that combination of the eucalyptus and turmeric is, I think, what gives it the cooling and yet warming sensation at the same time. I was reading reviews of this fragrance on Reddit and I was like cracking myself up because someone was like, this smells like a middle-aged witch. And I know that that doesn't sound good, but like actually it smells really good. So I thought that that was really, really funny.
Daniela's perspective is just amazing with how she kind of takes it from the perspective of the earth, whereas your other perfumers kind of come at it from different angles. What are some of the questions that they would ask you when they were working through these creative briefs?
It all depended. Some of them were very interested in the botanical story of the flower, like its history, what is its story, what do we know about what it looked like. They were very interested in that. Other questions were related to like the fantasy of the story of disappearance and, you know, why did it happen? How did it happen? How does it make us feel? How do we want to feel in the future? Kind of leaning into that element of reinvention. So those were like some of the general themes that came up. And then a lot of what ended up coming up was questions around our process. How did you do this? How is it possible? What do we actually know? What does it mean? They were just very intellectually stimulated by the prospect of these flowers and what it meant to work on something like this.
That's amazing. And I love how you kind of gave them no boundaries when it came to creating these scents.
Yeah, it was a little wild there for a while, but it was really fun.
But yeah, I'd love to move on to floating forest. This one is another favorite on Scentbird. People are loving floating forest, and I am too. It's definitely different from anything that I have in my lineup.
Yeah, you know, this is our number 2 most selling fragrance. Okay, so this is based off of a flower that grew in Borneo, the Sharea cuspidata. It went extinct more recently in 1998. So some of you may know what's going on in Borneo in this general part of the world. There's a lot of logging and deforestation taking place to make way for palm. And so one of the side effects of that is that there are a lot of biodiversity issues happening as a result. The Sharea cuspidata is an example of that. It grows on this very tall flowering tree. The smell of this is an interesting mix, which is why I think you definitely have people who like really, really love it. And then some people who are like, oh my God, this is like really funky. What's going on here? But therein lies the uniqueness. At the top, you have black pepper, but you get a lot of like water lily. It's like a very aquatic green fragrance, which is why I think a lot of men like it as well. You get wet stones, papyrus at the bottom. You get like a little bit of a woodsy base, a little bit of like a salted musk at the base as well. So yeah, it is an aquatic fragrance. It is green and very Borneo, like walking through a rainforesty type environment.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I can see just like towering trees over my head. And I love how you incorporated a lot of aquatic notes, but that black pepper note really makes it unique to me because I love aquatic scents, but the black pepper gives it a twist of something unexpected. It's almost, I mean, it's definitely spicy, but when I first sprayed it on my skin, it was a creamy in a way. I don't even know if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. It is meant to be like a meditative fragrance, if you will. Yeah. So a little bit more like soothing and meditative.
So you said that this flower that it was inspired by, it went extinct in 1998. That's a bit more recent. How would you think of nature as an active collaborator in your creative process?
Yeah, this is a good question. And the reason I think it's a very interesting question is because oftentimes people approach it by saying, oh, like nature knows best and all that, or that, oh, like science tries to like overdo nature and we shouldn't do that. And I actually think that it's like a dance. I think that we have a lot of preconceived notions around how science should be used, and we tend to believe that science knows best. But if you truly talk to any scientists, they will tell you that science is really just lifelong learning, that we never know everything. And so we need to approach everything with a sense of humility. And I will say that, like, currently it is not possible to de-extinct these plants. And currently it is not possible to fully recreate their smells through something like biotech because the composition of a scent of a jasmine flower, for example, is very complex and we can't replicate that. So I think there needs to be a balance and a dance and a humility in how science is approached and talked about. And I think that nature can be a very inspiring source, but we need to be willing to listen and not think that we can do better than it in all cases.
That's exactly right. And sometimes you get new information that kind of informs things in a different way.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would, last but certainly not least, I would love to dive into Haunted Rose.
Haunted Rose. Ooh, this one had an effect on me from like the first mod that we created. I'll never forget where I was sitting, how I was feeling, like the feeling I felt in my body when I smelled it. I don't know why. For me, it was very special. So this is also a flower from South Africa. The macrostylus flower. This one disappeared, strangely enough, due to an alien plant invasion.
What?
Basically, like as populations were increasing in certain areas and colonization was happening in particular, there were new species that were brought to different areas. And sometimes those species were invasive and displaced native species, like the macrostylus. And so this flower, I mean, you can sense the name Haunted Rose. So there is rose here. There's also passion fruit, but it is a smoky, spicy rose, which is really interesting. There's sandalwood at the base. I just think this is like such a sexy, mysterious fragrance. This is great for a date night. This is great for a night out with girlfriends. This is like a sexy people only fragrance. I love it.
It's beautiful. Definitely a lot of rose, which I feel like, hello, Haunted Rose. That's the name. I feel like you get a lot of rose. It's a beautiful bouquet, but then there's that smokiness, that richness. But I get a little bit of the passion fruit, which speaks to the climate it was in too. It's super clever.
It is. And you know, there are a lot of people who say that they don't like rose scents, but they really liked this one. But definitely if you do like rose scents, I think you'll really enjoy this one. This one is special. And I don't have strong opinions about rose. So I don't like skew either way, but this is a special fragrance in my mind.
Definitely. I feel like people have a very singular idea of rose, but this definitely flips it on its head and presents a new kind of bouquet. I'm wondering, because you've made 6 beautiful fragrances, you've done tons and tons of research into each flower that inspired it. How has creating these fragrances impacted the way you kind of approach nature and art and science?
The first thing that goes through my mind is that it's been a reminder of the interconnectedness of things. All things are interconnected. They're also fleeting. Just the other week, I was talking to a group on Maui. Because we have a basically series of partnerships that we've been putting in place because there is a biodiversity like message here. And so we've been actually working since before we launched the brand to put the right types of partnerships in place to make sure that, you know, we're creating the future that we want in the sense that we're not kind of redoing this, right? And creating more of these problems in the future.
For sure.
But I was just in touch with this group and, they were so happy to see that the stories of these flowers were going to be able to live on. And they were incredibly excited about this. And you talk to local people and they in some cases know more about the flower than what you were able to find in the herbarium on record, which is always really, really neat. And it really just goes to show you that, you know, things are interconnected in a way that is much more acute than we realize. And then secondly, the human connection to nature is really special. And even if science is able to resurrect these flowers, great. We hope that happens one day. But what science will never be able to resurrect is that lost time of the human relationship with those plants. And so in that, there's like a specialness that needs to be honored, you know, the human role in all of this, which I think is really, emotional.
As you've created this line of fragrances, are you kind of looking to other extinct flowers for inspiration as an expansion, or what's next for you?
Yeah, well, we certainly intend on doing more fragrances. What we hope to do as a brand is to, again, inspire people by doing things that they didn't previously think were possible. Flower stories will, of course, be near and dear to us, as will other unexpected elements from nature. So stay tuned for that. So more creative storytelling and fragrance experiences are definitely in the future.
What was your relationship with fragrance before taking on this project? Did you have like a signature scent, or were you the type that liked to experiment?
I did enjoy fragrance. I wasn't like a hardcore fragrance user, but pretty early on in my career, I developed a strong appreciation for fragrance. And that was because I was lucky enough to work with Lev and Alina at Fresh. And this was one of the first jobs that I had
Oh,
coming out of
wow.
college. And I would just see Lev do, and this is maybe why I was so intimidated by fragrance, because I would see Lev do the work that he does with the fragrances that he was developing for Fresh. And just the thing, and he would let me sit side by side with him and we would smell different mods that had come in. And I felt like I could never pick up on the things that he was picking up on like very strongly. And I was like, oh, like that's what you need to be to like develop good fragrances at some point. But I had forgotten that, Lev had been doing this for a long time
Mhm.
and he had established a really strong relationship with the perfumer that he was working with, which coincidentally was Jerome as well. But I began to like really love and take an interest in fragrance as a result of that experience. I developed much more of an appreciation for it because then I still have my Fresh products that I love for those
Oh,
reasons.
that's
Yeah.
amazing. And I feel like it really is something that you have to learn by immersion. You have to learn by having somebody like Lev teach you his ways and see what the process is like. So, Jasmina, I am excited to play Scent Connection with you, our extinct animals version. Scent Connection is our rapid fire segment where we draw connections between scent and different aspects of our lives. Because you've done such a beautiful job bringing some of these extinct flowers back to life, we thought, let's do the same with some extinct animals and animals nearing extinction. Are you ready to play?
Oh my God. Okay. I'm nervous, but let's do this.
So what's going to happen is I'm going to give you an animal and a little bit about its habitat and specific descriptors, and then I would love for you to tell me how you would capture that animal's essence or its habitat in a bottle.
Okay.
Let's kick things off with the woolly mammoth, which I hear they're trying to bring back. We'll see. But they are grass-eating giants with long, curved tusks that are used for dipping, fighting, and manipulating objects. They have long, dense black hair, a fatty hump, and a long nose-like trunk. There's part of an ongoing conversation of de-extincting the woolly mammoth.
Okay. So I'm thinking mid notes needs to be something fatty, like some sort of like a butter accord if
Okay.
we can. Base notes, definitely like a lot of musk. Like I'm thinking like barnyard kind of musky smells. And then the top note, something sharp. I'm thinking like something sharp, something that's like maybe a little bit grassier, I think.
Okay.
So grass, butter, musk.
Ooh, I love it. That sounds super unique. Okay, so the next animal I have is the saber-toothed cat for you. They were similar to lions, although shorter and almost twice as heavy. Some depictions show this cat as a solitary hunter like a modern tiger, but fossil evidence suggests that they may have lived in packs. The saber-toothed cat was not very good at chasing down prey, sad. Its heavy, bulky body, short legs, and bobtail made it better suited for ambush attacks. It would use its powerful front legs to grab and hold prey so that it could use its formidable saber-like teeth, which were serrated along the front and back edges like a steak knife.
Ooh, okay. I'm thinking some sort of metallic or metally accord
Okay.
is like what's going to be happening here. Maybe like a little bit of fruit,
Okay.
like currant or something like that.
Mhm.
So something that's like mellow. And then in the base, I'm thinking something dry and sandy. That's what I'm thinking.
Ooh, I like it.
Metal, fruit, sand.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a very
Could be interesting.
interesting. And I'm also like, I'm a cat lady. I know I would love it.
There you go. There you go.
And the last animal, but one of the most recognizable among the extinct animals, is the dodo. Although genetically similar to pigeons and doves, it's theorized that the dodo became flightless because of a lack of predators, causing them to grow in size. It has been depicted with brown, gray plumage, yellow feet, and a tuft of tail feathers, with a gray, naked head and a black, yellow, and green beak. The extinction of the dodo in less than a century of its discovery called attention to the previously unrecognized problem of human involvement in the disappearance of entire species.
What a theme that is very
I
relevant
know, right?
to our extinct flower stories. Yes. So I'm thinking something sweeter, maybe a little bit of like cotton candy, but balanced out with a little bit more like petrichor because they're not able to fly. So they're more on the ground. So a
Okay.
little bit more like dirt accords. So a little bit of sweetness plus dirt accords. And then, I don't know.
I mean, I feel like that's an interesting start.
Yeah.
I would
That's
wear it.
one way to put it.
Because I like dirt and, like the wet stone accord that you have going on, but cotton candy is such a unexpected pairing,
Yeah. It is. Yeah. I mean, like the dodo makes your heart be like, oh,
I
so
know. And they
a little
look
bit of that.
adorable when they're illustrated. So it makes sense to me.
Good.
Awesome. Jasmina, thank you so much for playing Scent Connection. That was a lot of fun.
It was. Thanks so much for having me. I had a lot of fun doing this.
Oh my gosh, come back anytime. So I feel like we've touched on a lot already, and I feel like I've learned so much from you, which this has been just so much fun. To wrap things up, and this may be a loaded question, what do you want our listeners to take away from your work in science and beauty about art and creativity?
That science can be creative, but more importantly is our brand mission, which is reminding everyone that we can invent our tomorrow and that every single day there are people that are working hard to make sure that the future that we have is better than what we have today, and that we contribute to that too, that we are capable of reinvention, just like these flowers. We're able to kind of reinvent their story and have them live on. We as humans are capable of phenomenal abilities to reinvent ourselves on a daily basis if we need to, and I think that that's really empowering. So hopefully, you take away a little bit of that.
Yeah, I do. I love that. And we're capable of more than we think we are. But also, let's try to leave this beautiful planet better than when we found it.
Exactly.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for your time. This was a lot of fun.